Hampshire, 1815. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a young woman without remarkable beauty must resign herself to a destiny of solitude, especially when overshadowed by sisters of rare loveliness. Miss Emma Hartley, at 19, occupied that most cruel position among three sisters, neither the firstborn destined for precedence nor the youngest pampered by the family. She was simply the middle one, the forgotten, the overlooked, the one spoken of in pitying whispers. Poor Emma, she may never find a suitor. Not that she was entirely without charms, but beside Miss Arabella, 20, with luminous eyes, and Miss Sophie, 18, with melodious laughter, Emma seemed to fade like watercolors in the sun. Her consolation was found within the pages of novels and in stories she wrote in secret, taking refuge in the quiet corners of Oakwood Manor. The most recent blow to her already scarred heart came when Lord Philip Brown, with whom she had shared animated conversations during 3 balls, asked for Arabella's hand after just 1 waltz. Emma cried for a week. Notable progress. For once, such disappointments had lasted an entire month. Her collection of rejections had made her an expert in the art of rebuilding herself. Emma, dear, do stop hiding in corners. You shall never attract attention if you insist on blending with the wallpaper, Lady Hartley chided, adjusting her daughter's modest cream gown. They were preparing for Arabella's engagement ball, an event that promised to be the highlight of the Hampshire social season. Emma nodded dutifully. Yes, mother. And for heaven's sake, attempt to smile. Your perpetual solemnity is most unattractive to gentlemen. Yes, mother. The words had become a litany, repeated so often they had lost all meaning. Sir William Hartley, a genial baronet of modest fortune, patted his middle daughter's shoulder as he passed. There's my good girl. Perhaps you'll meet someone suitable tonight. His kindness, though genuine, carried the sting of lowered expectations. Suitable for Emma did not mean dashing, or wealthy, or titled. It meant any gentleman willing to overlook her ordinariness. The ballroom at Hartley House blazed with hundreds of candles, illuminating the cream and gold decor, chosen specifically to complement Arabella's complexion. Emma stood to the side, watching as her elder sister floated across the dance floor in Lord Philip's arms, her golden curls bouncing with each step. Sophie, surrounded by admirers, laughed gaily at something one of them said, her perfect white teeth gleaming. Would you care for some punch, Miss Hartley? Mr. Wilson, their vicar, offered kindly. At 45, with thinning hair and spectacles, he was the sort of gentleman her mother had begun suggesting might make Emma a comfortable match. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. She accepted the cup, grateful for the momentary occupation it provided her hands. Conversation with the vicar was pleasant enough. He had read widely and could discuss literature with reasonable intelligence, but Emma could not help noticing how her mother nodded approvingly from across the room. The evening progressed predictably until a sudden hush fell over the assembly. The musicians faltered, then resumed playing with renewed vigor. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and whispers rippled through the ballroom. The Duke of Ravenscroft. I had no idea His Grace would honor us with his presence. Is he truly as wealthy as they say? Wealthier, I assure you. And still unmarried at 30. Emma peered around Mr. Wilson to catch a glimpse of this illustrious visitor. The Duke of Ravenscroft, Alexander Worthington, was the most sought-after bachelor in England, not only for his title and vast fortune, but for his striking appearance. Tall and broad-shouldered, with raven hair and piercing grey eyes, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had never been denied anything in life. Lady Hartley nearly tripped in her haste to welcome him, dragging both Arabella and Sophie forward for introductions. Emma remained where she was, knowing her presence was not required for such an important meeting. She watched as the Duke bowed politely to her sisters, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Then, inexplicably, his gaze swept past the Hartley beauties and locked with Emma's. A peculiar stillness came over his features. Emma quickly looked away, certain she had committed some faux pas by staring. When she dared glance up again, the Duke was making his way through the crowd directly toward her. Miss Emma Hartley, I presume. His voice was deep and rich, like aged brandy. Emma glanced behind her, certain he must be addressing someone else. Finding no one, she stammered, Yes, Your Grace. Would you do me the honor of the next dance? The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. From the corner of her eye, Emma could see her mother's astonishment, her father's confusion, and the matching expressions of disbelief on her sisters' faces. "I fear there must be some misunderstanding, Your Grace," Emma said quietly. "I am Miss Emma Hartley, the middle daughter. Perhaps you intended to address my sister, Miss Arabella, the bride-to-be, or Miss Sophie." A smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "I am perfectly aware of who you are, Miss Emma Hartley. I have just endured the most thorough introduction to your entire family. Now will you dance with me, or must I stand here making a spectacle of us both?" Bewildered and certain this must be some cruel jest, Emma placed her hand in his outstretched one. "As you wish, Your Grace." As he led her to the dance floor, Emma heard the whispers begin anew. The Duke and that Hartley girl. Surely he's only being polite. Perhaps he lost a wager. Or his eyesight. Emma lifted her chin. If this was to be a mockery, she would at least face it with dignity. The music began, a country dance that required them to separate and rejoin several times. Each time they came together, the Duke's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He danced with practiced ease, his movements fluid and graceful despite his imposing size. "You appear troubled, Miss Hartley," he observed during one of the figures that allowed conversation. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but I cannot fathom why you would single me out. If this is some form of amusement, I assure you I do not amuse myself at the expense of others." His voice held a hint of steel. "I asked you to dance because I wished to dance with you. Is that so difficult to believe?" "Yes," Emma wanted to say. "Yes, it is impossible to believe that the most eligible gentleman in England would genuinely desire her company." Instead, she said, "You honor me, Your Grace." "Alexander," he said suddenly. "I beg your pardon?" "My name is Alexander. I should like to hear you say it, though not here, of course. Propriety and all that nonsense." Emma missed a step, nearly treading on his polished boot. "Your Grace, I hardly think—" "You think a great deal, Miss Hartley. I can see it in your eyes. What thoughts occupy that mind of yours when you stand in corners observing everyone?" The dance ended before she could formulate a response. The Duke bowed deeply, and Emma curtsied. As he straightened, he said, "I shall call upon you tomorrow, Miss Hartley. Until then." He walked away, leaving Emma standing alone on the dance floor, the center of attention for the first time in her life, and utterly mortified by it. Lady Hartley's excitement reached fever pitch the following morning. A duke! A duke has singled out a Hartley daughter, the wealthiest, most powerful. "Oh, I think I shall faint." "But, Mother, he asked for Emma," Sophie pointed out, her pretty face scrunched in confusion. "Why would he want Emma when Arabella is practically a diamond of the first water, and I am considered quite handsome too?" "Sophie," Sir William admonished, though without much force. Emma sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. "I am certain His Grace was merely being courteous. There can be no serious intent behind his attentions." "Nonsense," Lady Hartley declared. "He is coming to call today. We must make everything perfect. Emma, wear your blue gown. It does something for your complexion, at least, and for goodness sake, do something with your hair." Emma touched her brown locks self-consciously. Unlike Arabella's golden curls or Sophie's rich auburn waves, her hair was neither particularly lustrous nor impressively styled. It was simply hair. Arabella, who had been unusually silent, finally spoke. "I think the Duke seemed quite taken with you, Emma." Her tone held genuine puzzlement rather than resentment. "When he looked at you, it was different." "Different how?" Emma asked. Arabella struggled to find the words. As if he recognized you somehow. But that was impossible. Emma had never encountered the Duke of Ravenscroft before last night. Surely she would remember meeting such a man. True to his word, the Duke's impressive carriage arrived precisely at the acceptable hour for morning calls. Lady Hartley nearly swooned at the sight of his 4 matched greys and the gold crest emblazoned on the carriage door. The butler announced him with appropriate ceremony, and the entire Hartley family rose as one when he entered the drawing room. His towering figure seemed to make the modestly proportioned room shrink. "Your Grace," Lady Hartley curtsied so deeply she nearly touched the floor. "What an honor to welcome you to our humble home." The Duke's gaze swept the room, acknowledging each person with a slight nod until it rested on Emma. Something in his expression softened. "Lady Hartley, Sir William," he greeted them. "I hope you will forgive my presumption in calling without a formal invitation, but I wish to congratulate Miss Arabella on her engagement and to continue my acquaintance with Miss Emma." Emma felt her cheeks grow warm under his regard. Lady Hartley practically pushed Emma forward. "Of course, Your Grace. Emma is delighted by your interest, are you not, Emma dear?" "Mother," Emma murmured, mortified. The Duke's lips twitched. "Perhaps Miss Emma might show me your gardens. I am a great admirer of horticulture." "Our gardens are hardly worthy of your attention, Your Grace," Emma said. "They are very modest compared to what you must be accustomed to at Ravenscroft. Nevertheless, I should like to see them." Lady Hartley nearly shoved them out the door, pausing only long enough to whisper fiercely in Emma's ear, "Do not ruin this." The gardens behind Oakwood Manor were indeed modest, but well tended, with winding gravel paths and carefully cultivated flowers arranged by season. They walked in silence for several minutes, the Duke shortening his stride to match Emma's pace. "You must think me very odd, Miss Hartley," he finally said. Emma glanced up at him. In the morning light, his features were even more striking. The strong jaw, the straight nose, the intensity of his grey eyes beneath dark brows. "I confess, I do not know what to think, Your Grace. I told you my name is Alexander." "That would be most improper, Your Grace, and yet I wish it all the same." He stopped beneath the shade of an elm tree, turning to face her. "You truly do not recognize me, do you?" Emma's brow furrowed. "Have we met before? I apologize if I have forgotten. No, the fault is mine. It was many years ago, and I was not as I am now. I don't understand." The Duke, Alexander, studied her face intently. 12 years ago, there was a gangly boy of 18 who came to visit Hampshire with his father on business. While the adults discussed matters of finance, this boy wandered the grounds and discovered a little girl of 7 or 8, sitting beside a stream, weeping as if her heart would break. Emma's breath caught. A distant memory surfaced, a day when Arabella had received a new doll for her birthday, and Sophie had been given a smaller version of the same. Emma, however, had received nothing, an oversight her mother later attributed to confusion with the shopkeeper. She had run to her secret place by the stream to cry where no one could see. "That was you," she whispered. Alexander nodded. The boy asked why she cried, and she told him about the birthday and the dolls. So he took out his pocket knife and cut a branch from a willow tree. "This is a magic wand," he told her, "and you are a fairy princess who doesn't need dolls because you can make your own magic." Tears pricked Emma's eyes. "You made me a crown of wildflowers and said I was the queen of the stream. And you stopped crying and spent the next hour telling me the most marvelous story about the fairies who lived beneath the water. I had never met a child with such imagination." Emma stared at him in wonder. "But why would you remember such an encounter?" "Because," Alexander said softly, "in a lifetime of people wanting things from me, my title, my fortune, my influence, you were the first person who gave me something instead. You gave me a glimpse of a world where magic was possible, where a lonely boy could be a hero for an afternoon." "I was just a child," Emma protested. "Yes. And I have spent 12 years wondering what kind of woman that extraordinary child would become." His eyes held hers. "Now I know. She became a woman who still hides her light, who still believes herself unworthy of notice." Emma could scarcely breathe. "Your Grace." "Alexander," he insisted, "at least when we are alone." "Alexander," she whispered, and was rewarded with a smile that transformed his solemn face. "Much better." He offered his arm. "Shall we continue our walk? You can tell me another story about the fairies beneath the stream." Emma placed her hand on his arm, feeling as if she had somehow wandered into one of her own fanciful tales. "I fear I have grown too old for such stories." "Then tell me a new one," he suggested, "one about a duke who found himself captivated by the most interesting woman in Hampshire." And for the first time in years, Emma felt herself begin to shine. The visit from the Duke of Ravenscroft to Oakwood Manor became the talk of Hampshire society. Speculation ran rampant. Had the most eligible bachelor in England truly developed an interest in plain, unremarkable Miss Emma Hartley? Impossible. There must be some other explanation. "Perhaps he means to use her to get closer to Arabella," suggested Mrs. Fitzsimmons to Lady Chelmsford over tea. "Even though she is engaged, a duke would certainly be considered a better match than a mere baron's son." "Or maybe it's Sophie he's after," Lady Chelmsford replied. She is coming into her beauty, and using the middle sister as a distraction would be quite clever. Such theories multiplied and spread through drawing rooms across the county. Some were cruel enough to suggest that the Duke had made a wager about seducing the plainest girl of the season. Others, more charitable, wondered if perhaps Miss Emma possessed some hidden quality that only a man of the Duke's discernment could appreciate. The Hartley household itself was in turmoil. Lady Hartley oscillated between ecstatic planning for a duchess in the family and gnawing anxiety that Emma would somehow sabotage this miraculous opportunity. "You must not contradict him, Emma. Men of his station expect deference," she instructed, trailing behind Emma as she attempted to find solitude in the morning room. "And do try to laugh at his jokes, even if you do not understand them." "Mother, please," Emma sighed. "His Grace has called exactly twice. There is no need to start planning a wedding breakfast." "Twice!" Lady Hartley exclaimed. "When a duke calls twice on a young lady of modest means and unremarkable appearance, it speaks volumes about his intentions." Emma winced at the casual assessment of her looks, though she could hardly dispute it. Or perhaps it speaks of simple kindness and a childhood memory. Lady Hartley waved this away. "Dukes do not make social calls out of kindness, my dear. They do so with purpose." Arabella, whose own engagement seemed suddenly overshadowed, watched her sister with curious eyes. One afternoon she found Emma in their father's study, writing in her journal. "What do you write about so intently?" Arabella asked, settling into the chair opposite. Emma hastily closed the book. "Nothing of consequence." "Is it about the Duke?" Arabella's voice held no malice, only genuine curiosity. "Why should I write about His Grace?" "Because he looks at you as if you are the most fascinating creature he has ever encountered. It's really quite remarkable." Arabella tilted her head. "Do you care for him, Emma?" The question caught Emma off guard. Did she care for Alexander Worthington? She hardly knew him, and yet the memory of his smile, the warmth in his eyes when he spoke of their childhood encounter, the way he seemed to actually listen when she spoke. "It would not be wise to develop an attachment," Emma said carefully. "His Grace may be momentarily diverted by novelty, but men of his station marry for advantage, not sentiment." Arabella frowned. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Dismiss the possibility of your own happiness before giving it a chance to take root." She reached across and took Emma's hand. "You are worthy of being loved, Emma, even by a duke." Emma's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "You are too kind, Bella." "Not kind. Truthful." Arabella squeezed her hand. "And if His Grace has the wisdom to see what I have always known, that my sister possesses a beautiful soul and a brilliant mind, then perhaps he is worthy of you." Emma could only stare in astonishment. Never had she imagined her beautiful, confident sister harboring such thoughts about her. "Do you truly see me that way?" she whispered. "Of course I do." Arabella looked surprised. "We all do. Why do you think Father always brings his books and papers to you when he needs help organizing his thoughts? Or why Sophie seeks you out whenever she is troubled? You are our rock, Emma. You see what others miss and understand what remains unspoken. I always believed I was simply forgettable." "Oh, Emma." Arabella's eyes filled with sympathetic tears. "You are the heart of this family. We may not have shown it well, but you have never been forgotten. Not by us." Emma felt as if a weight she had carried for years had suddenly lifted. If her own family truly saw her, valued her, perhaps it was not so inconceivable that Alexander might see something worthy in her as well. The Duke called again the following day, this time bringing a gift, a beautifully bound volume of poetry. "I remembered you mentioned an appreciation for Wordsworth," he said, presenting it to Emma as they sat in the drawing room under Lady Hartley's watchful eye. "Your Grace is too generous," Emma murmured, running her fingers reverently over the embossed leather cover. "I have a proposal," the Duke announced, causing Lady Hartley to nearly drop her teacup. "Sir William, Lady Hartley, I should like to invite your family to Ravencroft Hall for a weekend party. Several distinguished guests will be in attendance, and it would provide an excellent opportunity to celebrate Miss Arabella's engagement properly." Lady Hartley's eyes widened to saucers. "Your Grace honors us beyond measure. We would be delighted to accept." "Excellent." The Duke's eyes, however, remained fixed on Emma. "Miss Hartley, I particularly hope you will enjoy the Ravencroft Library. It has been the work of generations and contains some rather unusual volumes I believe might interest you. Emma could scarcely contain her excitement at the prospect. I look forward to it immensely. After the Duke departed, the Hartley household erupted into chaos. Gowns needed to be prepared, hairstyles discussed, proper etiquette for a ducal residence reviewed. In the midst of it all, a letter arrived for Emma. The handwriting was bold and masculine. "Miss Hartley, I find myself unable to express certain thoughts in the confines of your mother's drawing-room. Perhaps the written word will serve where speech fails. The party at Ravencroft is genuine, but my purpose in arranging it is entirely selfish. I wish to see you in my ancestral home, to watch your eyes as you discover its treasures, to observe which volumes in the library capture your attention. You believe yourself ordinary, Miss Hartley. I see nothing ordinary in you. Since our reunion, I have thought of little else but your quiet strength, your subtle wit, your composure in the face of others' bewilderment at my attention. Society whispers, questioning my interest. Let them whisper. I have spent a lifetime fulfilling expectations. The proper duke, the responsible guardian of my family's legacy, the desirable match. For once, I wish to follow my own inclinations rather than the dictates of duty, and my inclinations lead irrevocably to you. Until Ravencroft, Alexander Emma pressed the letter to her chest, her heart racing. Could this truly be happening? Could the most sought-after man in England genuinely desire her company, value her mind, see beyond her plain exterior to the person within? For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. Ravencroft Hall was everything a ducal seat should be, imposing, magnificent, steeped in history. The massive stone structure dated back to Tudor times, though successive generations of Worthingtons had expanded and improved it. Formal gardens stretched from the south facade, while ancient woodlands surrounded the estate on three sides. The Hartley carriage seemed insignificant as it approached the grand entrance, where liveried footmen stood ready to assist the guests. Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. Here, in his ancestral home, the Duke's elevated position would be impossible to ignore. The disparity between them would be on full display. Yet when they were shown into the grand entrance hall with its soaring ceiling and ancestral portraits, Alexander was waiting to greet them himself, a breach of protocol that spoke volumes. "Welcome to Ravencroft," he said, his eyes finding Emma's immediately. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" "Most pleasant, Your Grace," Sir William answered. "We are honoured by your invitation." The Duke personally escorted them to their rooms, taking Emma's arm as they climbed the grand staircase. "I have placed you in the East Wing," he murmured for her ears alone. "The morning light there is particularly fine for reading." Emma smiled at his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Alexander," he reminded her softly, "when we are away from others, please." The guest chambers assigned to Emma were more luxurious than anything she had ever experienced. A sitting room with silk-upholstered furniture, a bedchamber with an enormous four-poster bed draped in velvet, and a dressing room already attended by a maid who introduced herself as Lily. "His Grace assigned me specifically to you, miss," Lily explained as she unpacked Emma's modest belongings. "He said you might appreciate someone who knows the house well." "That was most considerate of His Grace," Emma replied, feeling overwhelmed. "If I may say so, miss, His Grace has been in rare form since announcing this party. The staff has never seen him so engaged. Usually he leaves entertainment arrangements to the housekeeper." "Indeed?" Emma tried to sound merely polite rather than desperately interested. "Oh, yes, miss. And he personally supervised the preparation of your rooms, even selecting the books on your nightstand." Emma glanced at the small stack of volumes beside the bed. The titles, all favourites she had mentioned in passing during their conversations, brought a lump to her throat. She dressed carefully for dinner in her best gown, a sage green silk that Lady Hartley had deemed acceptable though not inspired. Lily arranged her hair simply but elegantly, weaving small white flowers into the upswept style. When Emma descended the grand staircase, she found Alexander waiting at the bottom, resplendent in formal evening attire. His eyes widened appreciatively as she approached. "Miss Hartley, you look enchanting," he said, taking her hand and raising it to his lips. "Green suits you remarkably well." "Thank you, Your Grace," she replied, conscious of the footman standing nearby. "Ravencroft is truly magnificent." "It has been in my family for 16 generations," he said, offering his arm to escort her to the drawing-room, where other guests were gathering. "Though I confess it has never felt like a home. merely a responsibility. Surely growing up amidst such splendor must have been wonderful. A shadow crossed his face. Splendor does not equate to happiness, Miss Hartley. My father was not a demonstrative man. After my mother's death when I was 10, Ravencroft became a rather solitary place. Emma's heart ached at the thought of a young Alexander wandering these vast halls alone. I'm sorry for your loss. It was long ago. His expression lightened. But perhaps now you understand why a certain afternoon, by a stream with a storytelling fairy princess, remains one of my most cherished memories. Before Emma could respond, they reached the drawing room where 20 or so distinguished guests were already assembled. Lady Hartley, resplendent in her finest gown and family jewels, was holding court among several society matrons, while Arabella and Lord Philip stood close together near the fireplace. Sophie, surrounded by young gentlemen, laughed merrily at some shared jest. A hush fell over the room as the Duke entered with Emma on his arm. The scrutiny was almost tangible, and Emma felt her cheeks warm. "Courage," Alexander murmured, placing his hand briefly over hers where it rested on his arm. "Remember who you are." The evening progressed with all the ritual of high society: formal introductions, elaborate dinner service, polite conversation on approved topics. Throughout it all, Emma was acutely aware of Alexander's presence. Though protocol dictated he escort the highest-ranking lady to dinner, a widowed countess of advanced years, his gaze frequently sought Emma across the table. After dinner, the party returned to the drawing room for music and conversation. Sophie was persuaded to play the pianoforte, her graceful fingers coaxing a Beethoven sonata from the instrument. As the guests applauded, the Duke approached Emma, where she sat somewhat apart from the main group. "Would you care to see the library now, Miss Hartley?" he asked, his voice low. "The hour is not too advanced for a brief tour, and I confess I have been eagerly anticipating your reaction." Emma hesitated, glancing at her mother, who was deep in conversation with the Countess. "Would it be proper, Your Grace? We shall leave the door open, and I shall summon a footman to stand outside. Your reputation will remain untarnished, I assure you." With a nod, Emma rose to follow him. They slipped from the drawing room, largely unnoticed, though Emma caught Arabella's knowing smile as they left. The Ravencroft Library was everything Emma had imagined and more. 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves accessible by rolling ladders, reading alcoves with comfortable chairs, massive tables for spreading out maps or folios, and tall windows that would flood the space with light during daylight hours. "Oh," Emma breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's magnificent." Alexander watched her, his expression tender. 16 generations of collecting. My ancestors may have had their faults, but a love of literature was not among them. "Where would one even begin?" Emma whispered, overwhelmed by the wealth of knowledge surrounding her. "Perhaps here," Alexander suggested, guiding her to a glass-fronted cabinet. Inside rested a collection of handwritten journals bound in red leather. "These are botanical studies made by my great-grandmother, the 5th Duchess. She was quite the naturalist in her day." Emma peered at the exquisite illustrations accompanying the meticulous notes. "These are extraordinary. She was an extraordinary woman." Alexander moved to another cabinet. "And here are first editions of Shakespeare's folios, collected by my grandfather." They moved through the library, Alexander showing her treasures both rare and personal. Finally, they reached a smaller cabinet tucked in a corner. "This," he said, opening it with a small key, "is my own collection. Books that have particular meaning to me." Emma gasped as she saw the title of the topmost volume, Fairy Tales of the British Isles. "This is the very edition I was reading the summer we met," Alexander explained, carefully lifting it out. "After our encounter, I convinced my father's coachman to take me to the village bookshop, where I purchased this for you. But by the time I returned to the stream, you were gone, and we departed for London the next day." Emma stared at the worn volume, its pages yellowed with age. "You kept it all these years?" "I kept everything that reminded me of you." His voice was so gentle it made her throat tighten. "Including this." From behind the books, he withdrew a small, dried circlet of wildflowers, the crown he had made for her that day by the stream. "Alexander," she whispered, forgetting all propriety in her astonishment. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I told myself it was a child's fancy, this memory I cherished. Then I saw you at that ball standing apart, observing everything with those thoughtful eyes, and I knew. Knew what? Emma could barely breathe. That you were still her. The girl who made me feel, for the first time in my life, that someone saw me as more than a title and a fortune. That you were still creating stories in your mind, still feeling deeply, still... A deliberate cough from the doorway interrupted them. They turned to find the footman looking pointedly at the clock on the mantel. It was growing late, and propriety demanded they return to the company. Alexander sighed. "We must rejoin the others before your mother sends a search party." As they walked back toward the drawing room, Emma found her courage. "Alexander, why did you invite my family here?" "Truly." He stopped, turning to face her. "Because I wish to court you properly, Emma Hartley. Because despite the whispers and speculation, despite the expectations of my rank, despite everything society dictates about suitable matches, I find myself irrevocably drawn to you. Not to your sister's beauty or your family's connections, but to you, your mind, your spirit, your gentle strength." Emma's heart raced. "Society will not understand. Society rarely understands matters of the heart." He lifted her hand to his lips once more. "The question is not whether society will understand, but whether you might in time come to return my regard." Before she could answer, Lady Hartley's voice echoed down the corridor. "Emma? Are you there, dear?" Alexander released her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Think on it, Emma. We shall speak again tomorrow." As Emma lay in the luxurious bed that night, sleep eluded her. The Duke of Ravenscroft, Alexander, was courting her. Not Arabella, not Sophie, but her, the overlooked middle daughter, the plain one, the one destined for spinsterhood or a marriage of convenience to a country vicar. It seemed impossible, like something from one of her secret stories. Yet the evidence was overwhelming. His letters, his attentions, the childhood memory he had cherished, the crown of wildflowers preserved for 12 years. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to imagine a future different from the one she had resigned herself to. A future with Alexander, as his duchess, his partner, his love. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The weekend party at Ravenscroft Hall continued with all the diversions expected of aristocratic entertainment. A fox hunt for the gentlemen, a tour of the gardens for the ladies, an elaborate luncheon on the terrace overlooking the lake. Through it all, Alexander found ways to single Emma out for special attention, though always within the bounds of propriety. On the second afternoon, he arranged a small excursion to the ruins of an ancient abbey on the estate. Lady Hartley insisted on accompanying them, but fortunately became engrossed in conversation with Sir William about the cost of such magnificent stonework, allowing Alexander and Emma to walk slightly apart. "Have you thought about what I said last night?" he asked, as they paused before a crumbling archway overgrown with ivy. Emma nodded, her hands fidgeting with her parasol. "I have thought of little else, Your Grace. And..." She took a deep breath. "I fear you may be mistaking gratitude or nostalgia for deeper sentiment. Our childhood encounter, while meaningful to us both, hardly provides a foundation for..." She faltered. "For marriage?" Alexander supplied, his grey eyes intent on her face. Emma blushed. "I was going to say courtship, but yes, ultimately that is where such things lead." "You think I do not know my own mind?" "I think," Emma said carefully, "that you are a man accustomed to being obeyed and admired. Perhaps the novelty of a woman who does neither has temporarily diverted you." A spark of anger flashed in Alexander's eyes. "You do me an injustice, Miss Hartley. I am not some bored aristocrat seeking amusement at your expense." "I did not mean..." "You meant exactly that." His jaw tightened. "You would rather believe yourself unworthy of genuine affection than accept that I might see what others have overlooked." Emma stared at him, stung by the accuracy of his assessment. "Your Grace? My title again? After all we have shared?" He turned away, visibly composing himself. When he faced her again, his expression was controlled. "Forgive me. I should not have spoken so sharply." "No, you were right," Emma admitted. "I find it easier to doubt your intentions than to believe in them, because belief brings hope, and hope..." She trailed off. "And hope carries the risk of disappointment," Alexander finished softly. "I understand that better than you might think, Emma. My position has made me the target of fortune hunters and social climbers since I came of age. Every smile, every compliment, Every seeming interest in my thoughts or feelings has been calculated to gain advantage. Emma's heart ached for him. That sounds terribly lonely. It was, until I saw you again. He reached for her hand, holding it gently between both of his. You, who wanted nothing from me, who attempted to redirect my attention to your sisters, who looked skeptical rather than delighted at my interest. You were like a draught of fresh water after years of thirst. His words stirred something deep within Emma, a longing she had suppressed for so long that recognizing it now was almost painful. I am not immune to flattery, Alexander, she said, using his name deliberately. I merely need time to trust that your regard is genuine and enduring. A slow smile spread across his face. Time I can give you, and proof of my constancy if you will allow me the chance to demonstrate it. Before Emma could respond, Lady Hartley called from behind them. Emma, dear, His Grace's housekeeper is about to explain the history of the Abbey's foundation. Do come along. Alexander released her hand, but his eyes held a promise that sent warmth cascading through Emma's body. We shall continue this conversation another time, Miss Hartley. The remainder of the weekend passed in a blur of activity. The Duke hosted a grand ball on the final evening, inviting neighbouring gentry to join the house party. Lady Hartley was beside herself with excitement, ordering Emma to rest during the afternoon so that she would look her best. The Duke has shown marked preference for you, Emma, she said as she supervised Lily's arrangement of Emma's hair for the evening. This ball will be your opportunity to secure his interest. Mother, please, Emma protested. His Grace is merely being kind. Lady Hartley snorted inelegantly. Kind? A duke does not spend an hour showing a young lady his library out of kindness. He does not arrange excursions or seat her at his right hand at dinner out of kindness. He does these things with purpose, Emma, and you would do well to recognize that purpose and encourage it. And if his purpose is not what you imagine, if it is merely friendship he seeks? Friendship. Lady Hartley looked scandalized. Men do not seek friendship with unmarried young ladies, Emma, not men of his station. They seek wives, suitable, properly connected, well-dowered wives. I have none of those qualifications, Emma pointed out. Perhaps not. Lady Hartley's expression softened unexpectedly. But you have qualities that might matter more to a man who already possesses everything else: intelligence, discretion, loyalty. Emma stared at her mother in surprise. Never before had Lady Hartley acknowledged such virtues in her middle daughter. You think me intelligent? Emma asked cautiously. Lady Hartley waved a dismissive hand. Of course you are intelligent, Emma. You have always been the clever one. Why do you think I despaired of finding you a husband? Men generally prefer beauty to brains, but a duke can afford to indulge in a wife with a mind of her own, provided she knows when to display it and when to conceal it. Emma wasn't sure whether to be flattered or offended by this assessment. Before she could decide, Lily announced that her hair was complete. The gown Emma wore that night was her finest, a silvery blue silk that brought out the hints of grey in her hazel eyes. It was not the latest fashion, having been made over from one of Arabella's cast-offs, but Lily had cleverly updated it with some ribbon and lace from the Ravencroft stores at the Duke's instruction. When Emma entered the ballroom, already filling with guests from the surrounding estates, her eyes immediately sought Alexander. He stood near the entrance, greeting arrivals with perfect courtesy. Every inch the aristocratic host in his formal black evening attire, a single ruby gleaming in his cravat. The moment he saw her, his polite smile transformed into something warmer, more intimate. Excusing himself from his current conversation, he made his way directly to her side. Miss Hartley, he said, bowing over her hand. You are a vision tonight. Emma curtsied. You flatter me, Your Grace. I speak only the truth. He straightened, his eyes never leaving hers. Would you honor me with the first dance? A ripple of whispers spread through the nearby guests. For a host to single out a guest of relatively modest rank for the opening dance was unprecedented. Emma felt the weight of dozens of curious stares. Are you certain, Your Grace? Surely protocol demands you dance with someone of higher rank. Alexander's mouth quirked. The privilege of being a duke, Miss Hartley, is that I may occasionally set protocol aside without causing a scandal. Merely a minor social earthquake. Despite her nervousness, Emma laughed. Then I would be delighted, Your Grace. The orchestra began to play as Alexander led Emma to the center of the ballroom. The dance was a waltz, intimate, romantic, requiring his hand at her waist and her hand upon his shoulder. As they began to move in perfect harmony, Emma felt a curious lightness, as if they were floating above the polished floor. "Every man in this room envies me at this moment," Alexander murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Emma gave him a skeptical look. "I sincerely doubt that, Your Grace. You doubt because you do not see yourself as others see you tonight." His grip tightened slightly. "You are radiant, Emma, glowing from within in a way that mere beauty cannot match." "You make me feel beautiful," she admitted softly. "Then I have accomplished at least one worthy thing in my life." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When this dance ends, I must attend to my duties as host. But later, when the supper is served, meet me in the East Gallery. There is something I wish to show you." The dance concluded too quickly, and Alexander bowed deeply before escorting Emma back to her family. For the next hour she moved through the ball in a daze, dancing when asked, conversing when spoken to, but always aware of Alexander's presence in the room, though he did not approach her again. When the supper interval was announced, Emma made her excuse to her mother, a need for fresh air, and slipped away from the crowd. The East Gallery was quiet and dimly lit, its walls lined with portraits of Worthington ancestors dating back centuries. Alexander was already waiting, a single candle in his hand. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Did you doubt I would?" "I have learned never to take your compliance for granted," he replied with a smile. "Come, what I wish to show you is at the end of the gallery." He led her past stern-faced dukes and their elegant duchesses, past military men in splendid uniforms and ladies in court dress, until they reached a small alcove. There, illuminated by the candle, hung a portrait unlike the others. A young boy of perhaps 10 seated beside a stream, a book open on his lap, his expression solemn, but his eyes alive with intelligence. "Is that you?" Emma asked, studying the painting with fascination. Alexander nodded. "Painted shortly after my mother died. My father commissioned it as a memorial of sorts. My mother loved that spot by the stream. It runs through the East Meadow, not far from where we stand now." Emma looked from the portrait to the man beside her, seeing in the boy's features the shadow of the duke he would become. "You were very young to lose her." "Yes." His voice held old grief. "She was gentle and kind, qualities my father considered weaknesses. After her death, he was determined to raise me as a proper Worthington, without the softening influence of maternal affection." "That sounds terribly harsh," Alexander shrugged. It was the only way he knew. His own upbringing had been similar. He turned to face her fully. "But that is not why I brought you here. Look more closely at the book in the portrait." Emma peered at the painting again. The book was open to an illustrated page showing what appeared to be fairy tales. "The very same volume I showed you in the library." Alexander's expression softened. "It was my mother's. Reading her stories was the only way I could keep her memory alive in a household determined to forget her gentleness. And that is why our meeting meant so much to you," Emma realized. "I reminded you of her." "In a way, yes. But it was more than that." He set the candle down on a nearby table and took both her hands in his. "Emma, when I found you by the stream that day, I was a lonely, grieving boy, being molded into something hard and unyielding. Your imagination, your willingness to create magic from nothing, your ability to transform tears into laughter, these things awoke something in me that my father's training had nearly extinguished." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. "Alexander, please let me finish." His hands tightened on hers. "My father succeeded in making me a proper duke, responsible, disciplined, conscious of duty. But that day by the stream preserved something essential in me, something I feared lost forever. You gave me that gift, Emma, though you cannot have known it." "It was you who gave me a gift," Emma countered softly. "You made a forgotten child feel special, if only for an afternoon." Alexander raised one hand to cup her cheek. "You were never forgotten. Not by me." The air between them seemed to shimmer with unspoken emotion. Emma felt herself swaying toward him, drawn by a force beyond her control or understanding. Alexander's gaze dropped to her lips, his intent unmistakable. Miss Hartley, are you there?" The voice of Lady Hartley's maid broke the spell. Alexander stepped back, though he kept hold of one of Emma's hands. "Here," Emma called, her voice unsteady. "I am here, Mary." The maid appeared at the entrance to the alcove, curtsying deeply at the sight of the Duke. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but Lady Hartley is looking for Miss Emma. The dancing is about to resume." "Of course," Alexander said smoothly. "Please inform Lady Hartley that I have been showing Miss Hartley some family portraits of historical interest. We shall return directly." When the maid had gone, Alexander raised Emma's hand to his lips. "This conversation, like so many others, must be continued at another time. But know this, Emma Hartley, my interest in you is neither passing fancy nor nostalgic indulgence. It is the recognition of a kindred spirit, long sought and finally found." Emma could only nod, too overwhelmed for speech. Together they returned to the ballroom where Lady Hartley waited with barely concealed impatience. "There you are," she exclaimed. "His Grace's cousin, Lord Ellsworth, has been asking for an introduction." Emma spent the remainder of the evening in a state of heightened awareness, dancing with various partners, including the affable Lord Ellsworth, who proved to be an excellent conversationalist. But her attention remained fixed on Alexander as he moved through the crowd, fulfilling his duties as host with graceful efficiency. Occasionally their eyes would meet across the room, and in those brief moments, Emma felt as if they were the only two people present, connected by an invisible thread of understanding and growing affection. As the ball drew to a close in the early hours of the morning, Alexander approached the Hartley family to bid them good night. "I hope you have enjoyed the evening," he said, his formal tone belied by the warmth in his eyes as they rested on Emma. "It was magnificent, Your Grace," Lady Hartley gushed. "Such elegance, such refinement." "Indeed," Sir William agreed. "Most generous of you to include us in such a distinguished gathering." Alexander inclined his head. "The pleasure has been entirely mine, I assure you." His gaze returned to Emma. "Miss Hartley, might I call upon you when you return to Oakwood Manor? There are several matters I should like to discuss further." Emma felt her cheeks warm under his regard. "Of course, Your Grace. You are always welcome." "Until then." He bowed and moved on to the next group of departing guests, the perfect aristocratic host once more. That night, as Emma prepared for bed, Lily helped her remove the flowers from her hair, humming softly as she worked. "If I may be so bold, miss," the maid said hesitantly, "the staff has been talking." Emma tensed. "About what?" "About His Grace and his particular interest in a certain young lady." Lily's eyes met Emma's in the mirror. "It's been many years since Ravencroft had a duchess, miss. The old servants say it's high time His Grace found someone to bring laughter back to these halls." "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Emma replied, though her racing heart betrayed her. Lily smiled knowingly. "Of course not, miss. But if I might offer one observation, His Grace looks at you the way my father used to look at my mother, as if you hung the moon and stars." Long after Lily had gone, Emma lay awake, replaying every moment of her interactions with Alexander. The way he sought her company, the tenderness in his voice when he spoke of their childhood meeting, the almost kiss in the gallery. Could it truly be possible that the Duke of Ravencroft, the most eligible man in England, had developed genuine affection for plain Emma Hartley? The evidence suggested he had, and for the first time, Emma allowed herself to believe not only in his sincerity, but in her own worthiness to receive such devotion. As sleep finally claimed her, a smile curved her lips. Whatever the future held, she would face it with new confidence, knowing that at least one person in the world saw her, truly saw her, and found her extraordinary. The Hartley family's return to Oakwood Manor following the weekend at Ravencroft was accompanied by a flurry of local interest. Callers descended upon the modest home in unprecedented numbers, all eager for first-hand accounts of the Duke's magnificent estate, and more particularly, any insights into his apparent interest in Miss Emma Hartley. Lady Hartley, delighted to find herself suddenly the centre of attention, held court in the drawing-room, describing in lavish detail the splendours of Ravencroft Hall. "The silver alone must be worth a king's ransom," she confided to Mrs. Norris and Mrs. Bellingham over tea. "And the Duke's collection of art, simply breathtaking." Emma, preferring to avoid such scrutiny, retreated to the garden whenever possible. It was there, 3 days after their return, that a familiar carriage bearing the Ravencroft crest appeared on the driveway. Her heart leapt at the sight. Though Alexander had promised to call, she had not expected him so soon. The Duke was shown into the drawing-room, where fortunately only Emma and her father were present, Lady Hartley having taken Arabella to the dressmaker's for final fittings of her wedding gown. "Your Grace," Sir William greeted him, rising from his chair. "What an unexpected pleasure." Alexander bowed. "Sir William, Miss Hartley. I trust I find you well after our exertions at Ravencroft." "Quite well, thank you," Emma replied, noting the intensity of his gaze even as he maintained perfect courtesy. "Excellent. I have come with a purpose, Sir William, if I might speak with you privately." Sir William looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, Your Grace. Shall we retire to my study?" As the gentleman left the room, Emma remained frozen in place, her mind racing. Could Alexander be asking for her hand already? Surely not. Their understanding was too new, too tentative. Yet what other business could the Duke of Ravencroft possibly have with Sir William Hartley? Time seemed to slow to an excruciating crawl as Emma waited. She picked up her embroidery only to set it down again, unable to concentrate. She paced to the window and back, smoothed her skirts, adjusted the flowers in the vase on the side table, anything to occupy her trembling hands. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, but was probably no more than 15 minutes, the study door opened. Sir William emerged looking dazed but pleased, followed by Alexander, whose expression gave nothing away. "Emma, my dear," Sir William said, his voice slightly unsteady, "His Grace has done us the very great honor of requesting permission to court you formally." Emma's gaze flew to Alexander's face. Though his posture remained properly dignified, his eyes held a mixture of hope, vulnerability, and something deeper that made her breath catch. "With your approval, of course, Miss Hartley," he added softly. Emma swallowed, gathering her composure. "I would be honored, Your Grace." A smile broke across Alexander's face, transforming his aristocratic features. "Sir William has graciously invited me to dine with your family this evening. I hope that arrangement meets with your approval as well?" "Of course," Emma managed, though her mind was whirling. Sir William cleared his throat. "I shall go and inform Lady Hartley's maid to expect an additional guest for dinner. She will want to make preparations." He excused himself, leaving Emma and Alexander alone for the first time since the gallery at Ravencroft. The moment the door closed, Alexander crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. "I could not wait another day," he confessed. "After you left Ravencroft, the house seemed empty in a way it never has before." "Alexander," Emma whispered, still scarcely believing this was real. "Are you certain? The ton will be scandalized." "Let them be scandalized." His thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. "I have spent my life fulfilling the expectations of others. In this, I will please only myself, and you, if I am fortunate." "But why me?" The question that had haunted her since their first dance finally escaped her lips. "Of all the women in England, why Emma Hartley?" Alexander's expression turned solemn. "Because you see me, Emma, not the Duke, not the fortune, not the connection, but me. Because when I am with you I feel not like His Grace the Duke of Ravencroft, but simply Alexander, a man who can laugh, who can dream, who can hope for something beyond duty and obligation." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I do see you," she whispered. "I always have. And that," he said, raising one hand to gently brush a tear from her cheek, "is why I love you." The declaration, simple and heartfelt, stole Emma's breath away. "You love me." "With all my heart," Alexander confirmed, his gaze never wavering. "I believe I have loved you since that day by the stream, though I did not recognize it then. The memory of you has shaped me, guided me, preserved the best parts of me through years of loneliness and responsibility." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. "I think perhaps I have loved you too, though I dared not name it. First, as the kind boy who made me feel special, then as the man who looked at me and truly saw me when others looked through me." Alexander's hand cupped her cheek. "May I kiss you, Emma? I have wanted to since the moment I recognized you at that ball." Instead of answering, Emma rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, sweet, and filled with promise, a first step on a journey they would take together. When they parted, Alexander's smile was radiant. I shall take that as a yes. The news of the Duke of Ravenscroft's formal courtship of Miss Emma Hartley spread through Hampshire society like wildfire. Reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage to reluctant admiration. "The middle Hartley girl?" Lady Chelmsford repeated incredulously when informed. "Not the beauty or even the youngest? How extraordinary!" "Perhaps she has bewitched him," suggested Mrs. Fitzsimmons darkly. "These quiet ones often have hidden arts." Lord Ellsworth, visiting from London, laughed at such theories. "Worthington knows his own mind," he told the Assembly at the local hunt ball. "Always has. If he's chosen Miss Emma Hartley, you may be certain it's because he sees value where others have been blind." The courtship proceeded with remarkable swiftness. Alexander called at Oakwood Manor almost daily, sometimes bringing gifts, books mainly, but occasionally small treasures he thought might please Emma. A delicate watercolour of Ravenscroft stream, a pressed flower from his mother's garden preserved between glass, a tiny music box that played a melody his mother had sung to him as a child. "You bring me pieces of yourself," Emma observed one afternoon as they walked in the garden, chaperoned at a discreet distance by Sophie. "Because I wish to give all of myself to you," Alexander replied. "My past, my present, my future, they are yours if you will have them." 2 weeks into their courtship, Lady Hartley could contain herself no longer. "When do you suppose His Grace will make an offer?" she asked Emma as they prepared for yet another of the Duke's visits. "It has been a fortnight already." "Mother, please," Emma protested, blushing deeply. "These things take time." "Time!" Lady Hartley exclaimed. "Her Duke need not observe the usual proprieties, Emma. When one commands his consequence, one may act decisively." But Alexander, for all his declarations of love, seemed content to proceed at a measured pace. He spoke often of the future, but made no formal proposal, leaving Emma both reassured of his sincerity, for surely a fortune hunter would have moved more quickly, and somewhat bewildered by the delay. The answer came one evening when Alexander arrived for dinner in a state of barely concealed excitement. "Might we walk in the garden after the meal?" he murmured to Emma as they moved to the dining room. "I have news." Throughout dinner, Emma could barely focus on her food, her mind racing with possibilities. When the meal finally ended, Alexander requested Sir William's permission for a brief stroll with Emma before the tea tray was brought in. "The evening is mild," he observed, "and I believe Miss Hartley might enjoy some fresh air." Sir William agreed readily, his attitude toward the Duke having warmed considerably over the weeks of his attentive courtship. "Just don't wander too far," he cautioned good-naturedly. "Lady Hartley will send out a search party if you delay the tea service." Once outside, Alexander led Emma to a stone bench, partly concealed by a flowering lilac bush. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the garden, turning the modest plantings into something magical. "What is your news?" Emma asked, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Alexander took both her hands in his. "I have spent the past fortnight putting my affairs in order, Emma, consulting with my solicitors, reviewing settlements, preparing Ravenscroft for changes." "Changes?" Emma echoed. "The addition of a duchess," he clarified, his eyes warm with affection. "If she will have me." Emma's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Alexander!" He slid from the bench to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "Emma Hartley, from the moment I rediscovered you, I have known that my life's happiness depends upon making you mine. Your intelligence, your gentle strength, your ability to see beyond titles and fortune to the man beneath, these qualities have captured my heart utterly." Emma could scarcely breathe as Alexander continued. "I love you, Emma. I wish to spend my life with you, to share my home, my name, my future, to create new memories by the stream where we first met, to fill Ravenscroft with laughter and love, and in time, perhaps children who will inherit your kind heart and perceptive mind." Tears blurred Emma's vision as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it revealed a ring unlike any Emma had ever seen, not the ostentatious diamond one might expect of a ducal betrothal, but a perfect circle of sapphires surrounding a pearl. "This was my mother's," Alexander explained softly. "She told my father that diamonds were cold, but pearls held warmth and wisdom. It seems particularly fitting for you." "It's beautiful," Emma whispered. "Emma Hartley, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? My Duchess? My partner in all things? For a moment, Emma could not speak, overwhelmed by emotion. All her life, she had been the forgotten one, the overlooked sister, the girl no one really saw. Now the most sought-after bachelor in England was on his knee before her, offering her not just his name and position, but his heart. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice trembling but clear. "Yes, Alexander, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Rising from his knee, he drew her to her feet and into his arms. "You have made me the happiest of men," he murmured, before claiming her lips in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally returned to the house, hand in hand with Emma's ring gleaming in the candlelight, the Hartley family's reaction was predictable. Lady Hartley promptly burst into tears of joy. Sir William shook Alexander's hand with uncharacteristic vigor. Arabella embraced her sister warmly, and Sophie clapped her hands in delight. "A duchess in the family," Lady Hartley kept repeating. "My Emma, a duchess." "Not just any duchess," Alexander corrected gently. "The Duchess of Ravenscroft, who will bring light and life back to halls that have been too long without a woman's touch." The announcement of the betrothal appeared in the London papers the following week, causing a sensation in society circles. Letters of congratulation and thinly veiled curiosity poured into both Oakwood Manor and Ravenscroft Hall. "They all want to know the same thing," Emma observed as she sorted through the correspondence at Ravenscroft, where she had been invited to dine with Alexander and begin familiarizing herself with the estate she would soon oversee. How did plain Miss Emma Hartley capture the Duke of Ravenscroft? Alexander, seated beside her in the morning room, frowned. "You are not plain, Emma. You are extraordinary. In your eyes, perhaps." She smiled to soften the words. "But you must admit, it is an unusual match by society's standards." "Society's standards have brought about far too many unhappy marriages," Alexander replied. "I prefer to set my own standards." The engagement period was brief by aristocratic measures. Just 8 weeks, during which Emma's wardrobe was completely replaced with garments befitting a duchess, her education in the management of a great estate begun in earnest, and preparations for a wedding of appropriate grandeur set in motion. Throughout it all, Alexander remained steadfastly attentive, visiting Oakwood almost daily and sending letters when business kept him away. Each correspondence revealed new facets of his character, deepening Emma's love and appreciation for the man she would marry. "My dearest Emma, affairs at the London house detain me another day, much to my frustration. The city seems particularly unbearable now that I know Hampshire holds my heart's treasure. Lord Ellsworth asked me today if I had lost my mind, throwing over the season's beauties for a country miss with no fortune or connections. I told him I had not lost my mind, but finally found it, and my heart in the bargain. He laughed and said he envied me. "Most of us marry for advantage or convenience," he said, "but you, Worthington, are marrying for love." When I agreed that I was indeed the fortunate one, he looked thoughtful and said something that struck me deeply. "Perhaps the forgotten ones are those most worth remembering. I thought of you then, my love, how you believed yourself forgotten and overlooked when in truth you were simply waiting to be properly seen, just as I, surrounded by fortune and privilege, was waiting to be seen not for my title, but for myself. We are a perfect match, you and I, the forgotten girl and the lonely duke, finding in each other the recognition we have both sought all our lives. I count the hours until I return to Hampshire and your sweet presence." With deepest affection, Alexander Emma kept his letters in a sandalwood box beside her bed, reading and rereading them when doubts threatened to overwhelm her. For despite Alexander's unwavering devotion, she could not help but wonder occasionally if she was truly prepared for the role that awaited her. Duchess of Ravenscroft, mistress of a great estate, hostess to the highest echelons of society. "What if I disappoint him?" she confided to Arabella one evening, as they sat in the bedroom they had shared since childhood. "What if I cannot meet the expectations of his position?" Arabella, whose own wedding to Lord Philip had been postponed to follow Emma's more illustrious ceremony, took her sister's hands. "Emma, you have spent your life exceeding expectations, managing household accounts when mother was indisposed, tutoring Sophie in history and literature, helping father organize his business affairs. You are more capable than any of us." "But society is different," Emma protested. "The Ton will scrutinize my every move. waiting for the provincial miss to make a misstep. Then let them scrutinize, Arabella said firmly. You will have what many of them lack, a husband who adores you not for your social graces or your family connections, but for your true self. The wisdom in these words gradually settled Emma's fears. By the time the wedding day dawned, a perfect June morning with clear skies and gentle breezes, she felt a calm certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The ceremony was held at Winchester Cathedral, with half the aristocracy in attendance. Emma wore a gown of ivory silk, with delicate pearl embroidery, designed by the same modiste who served the royal princesses. Her veil, however, was her own creation, adorned with tiny silk wildflowers, reminiscent of the crown Alexander had made for her all those years ago. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Emma saw not the glittering assembly of nobles and gentry, but only Alexander waiting for her at the altar, his face alight with love and pride. In that moment, she was no longer the forgotten middle daughter, but a woman deeply cherished, stepping confidently into her future. The vows were exchanged with clear voices. The ring, a simple gold band to complement her engagement pearl, was placed on her finger, and the blessing was pronounced. As they turned to face the congregation for the first time as Duke and Duchess of Ravenscroft, a shaft of sunlight broke through the stained glass windows, bathing them in a rainbow of colors. "A good omen," Alexander whispered, squeezing her hand. "Even the heavens celebrate our union." The wedding breakfast at Ravenscroft Hall was a triumph of elegance and hospitality. Emma moved among the guests with newfound assurance, accepting congratulations and well wishes with gracious dignity. Lady Hartley watched her middle daughter with an expression of amazed pride, while Sir William grew misty-eyed whenever he caught sight of Emma in her ducal tiara, a Worthington heirloom Alexander had insisted she wear. "You were born for this," Arabella murmured as the sisters shared a private moment amidst the festivities. "Look at you, every inch a duchess." Emma smiled. "Not born for it, perhaps, but found for it, by a man who saw me when no one else did." As the celebration wound down and the guests began to depart, Alexander sought out his new wife where she stood saying farewell to a distant cousin. "Are you tired, my Duchess?" he asked solicitously. "A little," Emma admitted, "but happily so." Alexander's eyes softened. "Then perhaps it is time we bid our own farewells and retire." A blush colored Emma's cheeks at his implication. They would spend their wedding night at Ravenscroft before departing the following day for a honeymoon tour of the Lake District, a location chosen specifically because of Emma's love for Wordsworth's poetry. As the last guests departed and the household settled into evening routines, Alexander led Emma through the grand halls of Ravenscroft to the ducal apartments, rooms she had never entered during her previous visits. Opening the door to the Duchess's chambers, he stood aside to allow her first glimpse of her new domain. Emma gasped in delight. The rooms had been completely refurbished in shades of blue and cream that she had once mentioned were her favorites. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases, their scent perfuming the air. A fire crackled in the marble fireplace despite the summer evening, creating an atmosphere of intimate warmth. But most striking was the painting hanging above the mantel, a new portrait of Emma herself, caught in a moment of laughter, her eyes alight with joy. The artist had captured not just her likeness, but her essence in a way that transformed her ordinary features into something luminous. "When did you commission this?" she asked, moved beyond words. "After the weekend party," Alexander replied, coming to stand behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "I wanted you to see yourself as I see you, beautiful, vibrant, full of life and intelligence." Emma leaned back against his chest, overwhelmed by the love evident in such a gesture. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me." Alexander turned her gently in his arms until she faced him. "Thank you for saving me," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "From loneliness, from a life half-lived, from becoming as cold and distant as these stone walls." Their kiss was tender at first, then increasingly passionate, a promise of the night to come and the lifetime that would follow. 1 year later, the Duchess of Ravenscroft sat in the garden of the dower house, watching as her husband knelt beside the stream that had witnessed their first meeting. Alexander was showing something in the water to a small group of village children who had been invited to Ravencroft for the annual Midsummer Festival, a tradition Emma had reinstated shortly after becoming mistress of the estate. Her hand rested protectively on her rounded abdomen, where the heir to the Ravencroft dukedom grew stronger each day. The child, a son, if the village midwife's predictions were correct, was due in autumn, bringing joy not only to his parents, but to the entire estate. Emma's first year as Duchess had not been without challenges. There had been skeptical relatives to win over, traditions to learn, staff to manage, and the inevitable adjustment to life as one half of a very public couple. But with Alexander's unwavering support and her own natural intelligence, she had navigated these obstacles with increasing confidence. More importantly, she had brought warmth back to Ravencroft. The hall that had once seemed so imposing now rang with music and laughter. The Duke, once known for his reserved demeanour, now smiled readily and laughed often. Together they had transformed a grand but sombre estate into a true home. "What has your husband found to fascinate the children so?" Lady Hartley asked, joining Emma on the garden bench. Her mother, visiting for the festival, had gradually reconciled herself to the fact that it was Emma, not one of her prettier daughters, who had made the match of the century. "Probably tadpoles," Emma replied with a smile. "Alexander discovered a whole colony of them yesterday, and has been as excited as a schoolboy ever since." Lady Hartley shook her head in wonder. Who would have thought the austere Duke of Ravencroft would take such pleasure in something so ordinary? "I would," Emma said softly. "He has always had the capacity for joy. He simply needed permission to express it." As if sensing her gaze, Alexander looked up, his face breaking into a smile that was reserved solely for her. Excusing himself from the children, he made his way to where Emma sat. "How are you feeling, my love?" he asked, taking the place beside her. "Not too tired?" "Perfect," Emma assured him, leaning into his strength. "Absolutely perfect." Alexander's hand covered hers where it rested on her belly. "I have been thinking about names," he said. "If it's a boy, I should like to call him William, after your father." Emma's heart swelled with love. "And if it's a girl?" "Then she shall be Grace," Alexander decided, "for the Grace that brought you into my life not once but twice." "A perfect name either way," Emma agreed. As they sat together in the summer sunlight, surrounded by the estate that was their shared responsibility and joy, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from forgotten middle daughter to cherished Duchess, from the girl who believed herself unworthy of notice to the woman who had captured the heart of England's most eligible bachelor. Life, she had discovered, sometimes offered second chances and unexpected turns. The path might lead through moments of doubt and disillusionment, but with courage and an open heart, it could ultimately arrive at a destination more wonderful than anything imagined in her girlhood stories. For Emma Worthington, Duchess of Ravencroft, once the overlooked Miss Emma Hartley, that destination was here in the arms of a man who had seen her true worth when all others looked past her, and in the future they were creating together one day, one memory, one love-filled moment at a time. The end. Dear listener, there are times, like Emma Hartley once felt, when we believe we've been overlooked, that the world sees everyone around us but not us. But please remember this: just because some people don't recognize your worth doesn't mean it isn't there. The most precious light often shines quietly. You are important. You are needed. And even if others fail to see it, what truly matters is how you feel about yourself. If you see yourself as defeated, that's the energy the world will reflect back to you. But if you choose to feel strong, capable, beautiful, radiant, then that light will flow outward, touching lives in quiet but powerful ways. Everything begins with what we choose to feel. When you're faced with a dark thought or a kind one, choose the kind one. Not because the world is always gentle, but because you deserve to feel peace. You deserve restful nights and mornings full of purpose. You may not even realize how much good you bring, but the way you care, the way you listen, the way you offer a hand, these are treasures the world deeply needs. Who wouldn't want a friend like you? So tonight, as you close your eyes, know this: you matter. You are loved. You are not forgotten. Keep shining, even softly, even quietly. The world is better because you're in it.